Bristol Myers Squibb just announced it's building one of the life science industry's most advanced AI factories, running on NVIDIA's newest supercomputing systems. It's a striking headline. But it raises a more interesting question than which company bought the biggest computer. What does a drug company actually do with that much computing power? What is it all computing? We'll use that announcement as a jumping-off point, but the real goal is to explain the work itself, the specific jobs AI supercomputers are now doing across the business of discovering medicines. Because once you understand the tasks, you understand why the whole industry is racing to build these machines. Let's quickly cover what was announced, then leave the branding behind. Bristol Myers Squibb is deploying its second large-scale AI supercomputer from NVIDIA, built on 8 rack-scale units of NVIDIA's newest generation, codenamed Vera Rubin. Each rack links dozens of graphics processors with high-speed connections so they behave like one enormous chip, and many of those racks join into what NVIDIA calls a superpod. 2 things are worth noting. First, the headline benefit isn't only raw speed, it's efficiency, roughly 10 times more useful computation per unit of electricity than the hardware it replaces. Second, it's unified, one shared system any researcher across the company's global sites can reach, so, as one executive put it, no one has to wait and no one is told they've hit a limit. Hold on to that idea of removing limits, it's the whole point. The real question, limits on what? To see why compute matters, appreciate the scale of the problem. Discovering a drug is a search problem, and the space is almost unimaginably large. Chemists estimate there are around 10 to the 60th possible drug-like molecules. That's a 1 followed by 60 zeros, far more than the number of stars in the observable universe. Somewhere in that ocean are the few molecules that will safely treat a given disease, and historically the only way to find them was the lab, making a molecule, testing it, and repeating, a slow cycle where each step takes weeks. So the modern strategy flips it, use computation to explore that space virtually, predict which molecules are promising before you ever touch a test tube, and save the slow lab work for only the best candidates. That is what the supercomputer is for. Now let's break it into the actual jobs it does. Job 1 comes before you design any molecule. You first have to decide what to attack. In most diseases, the trouble traces back to a specific protein behaving badly, one that's overactive in cancer, for example. That protein is called the target, and choosing the right one is among the most consequential decisions in the whole process. Pick a bad target, and you can spend a decade and a fortune failing. This is where AI earns its keep first. There's an overwhelming amount of relevant data, the human genome with its roughly 20,000 genes, millions of research papers, records of which genes switch on in which diseases. No human can hold all of that in their head. AI models read across those mountains of genomic, experimental, and clinical data, spot patterns humans would miss, and propose and rank the most promising targets. The company noted this kind of work saving their scientists weeks of effort, just to know where to aim. Once you know which protein to target, job 2 is understanding its physical shape, because in biology, shape is everything. A protein is a long chain that folds into a specific three-dimensional structure, and a drug works by fitting into a pocket on it like a key into a lock. For decades, determining that shape was painstaking lab work that could take years. Then AI changed the game, models like AlphaFold now predict a protein's folded structure in hours, and that breakthrough alone reshaped biology. But a static shape isn't enough, because proteins aren't statues, they wiggle and shift constantly. So the next layer is simulation, using physics to model how every atom moves, and how a candidate drug approaches, fits, and binds. This is called molecular dynamics, and it's staggeringly compute-intensive, calculating the forces on hundreds of thousands of atoms, step by tiny step. It's exactly what graphics processors were born to do, running huge numbers of calculations in parallel, a big share of what the supercomputer chews through. Job 3 is where things get genuinely creative. The same generative AI revolution behind tools that write text and images also applies to chemistry. Instead of only screening molecules that already exist, generative models can invent entirely new ones, proposing chemical structures designed from scratch to bind your target tightly, to be safe, to survive in the body, to be manufacturable. You describe what you need, and the model dreams up candidates no human had drawn before. Bristol Myers Squibb pointed to a fascinating example, expanding their libraries of molecules known as protein degraders. Traditional drugs usually work by blocking a harmful protein, like jamming a lock. Protein degraders do something cleverer, they tag the disease-causing protein for destruction, so the cell disposes of it entirely. Designing these is demanding, and generative AI explores that space far faster. This is the shift from AI as a search engine to AI as an inventor. Now you have a flood of candidate molecules, potentially millions of them. Job 4 is triage at massive scale, called virtual screening. Rather than making and testing molecules one by one, the AI scores every candidate computationally, how tightly it will bind the target, whether it's likely toxic, whether the body will absorb it. Molecules that fail on paper are discarded instantly and for free, and only the top-ranked survivors move toward the lab. Bristol Myers Squibb calls their philosophy predict first, letting predictions drive what to physically synthesize, rather than making things and hoping. And crucially, the AI optimizes for many properties at once. A real drug has to be effective and safe and stable and manufacturable, all together, and improving one often wrecks another. Balancing those competing demands across millions of options is a brutal computational problem, precisely the multidimensional optimization these machines excel at. This is where compute translates most directly into faster, better decisions. Job 5 is more foundational, and it's a big reason these companies need so much horsepower. You've heard of large language models, systems trained on vast text that develop a general understanding of language. The same idea now applies to biology and chemistry. By training enormous models on huge volumes of biological data, protein sequences, chemical structures, genomic information, you build foundation models that learn the underlying grammar of life itself. Instead of a narrow tool for one task, you get a general-purpose engine adaptable to many problems, predicting protein properties, generating molecules, understanding cells. NVIDIA offers a platform for this in life sciences, and Bristol Myers Squibb spoke about building proprietary foundation models in-house. Here's the key point about compute: training a model like this from scratch is one of the most demanding jobs there is, consuming immense processing power for days or weeks at a time. This is the workload that most directly justifies an entire supercomputer, and owning yours means your most valuable data and models stay yours. Job 6 is the newest frontier, and it ties everything together. So far I've described separate jobs: finding targets, predicting structures, designing molecules, screening them. Agentic AI connects them. Instead of a scientist manually running each tool and handing results to the next, an AI agent can chain the steps, reason about a problem, call on the right models, interpret what comes back, decide what to do next, and carry a task through many stages with far less hand-holding. NVIDIA provides a toolkit for building these agents for biology, and Bristol Myers Squibb described using agentic workflows to learn across their drug programs and speed up decisions. Picture an AI system that notices a promising target, spins up structure predictions, generates molecules, screens them, and surfaces the best options to a human, orchestrating the pipeline while scientists provide judgment. This is why always available compute matters so much. These agents run constantly, in parallel, across many projects at once. It's the difference between a faster tool and a tireless research partner. Step back, and you can see why the industry calls these systems AI factories. The metaphor is deliberate. A traditional factory takes in raw materials and energy and turns them into physical products at scale. An AI factory takes in data and electricity and turns them into intelligence, predictions, designs, and decisions, also at scale, around the clock. That reframes the earlier detail about performance per megawatt. When your factory's raw input is literally electrical power, energy efficiency isn't a footnote, it's the economics of the whole operation. More useful computation per unit of energy means more molecules explored, more models trained, more experiments simulated, for the same power bill. It also explains the talk of no limits and no waiting. In a discovery factory, idle researchers and queued-up jobs are like an assembly line sitting still. Compute stops being a scarce, rationed resource and becomes infrastructure, like electricity itself. Before we wrap, an honest reality check, because it's easy to get swept up in the hype. All of this computing power is genuinely transformative, but it is not magic, and it doesn't manufacture cures on demand. Biology is fiendishly complex, and even the best models are approximations. The human body springs surprises no simulation fully captures. And a molecule that looks brilliant on a supercomputer still has to survive real laboratory testing, then years of clinical trials in actual people, which is where most drug candidates still fail. Compute doesn't skip that gauntlet. What it genuinely does is make the early stages faster and smarter, fewer dead ends, better starting points, more shots on goal. That's a serious competitive edge, not a magic wand. And compute alone isn't enough. These machines are only as good as the data you feed them and the scientists who direct them. The supercomputer is an amplifier, not a replacement. So let's bring it home. The Bristol Myers Squibb announcement is eye-catching, but the deeper story isn't one company's hardware purchase, it's a window into a shift across the entire life sciences industry. Computation is becoming a core instrument of drug discovery, as essential as the microscope or the lab bench once were. And now you know what it actually does. It finds the right targets to aim at. It predicts the shapes of proteins and simulates how molecules move and bind. It invents brand new molecules. It screens millions of candidates to decide what's worth making. It trains foundation models that learn the language of biology. And it runs AI agents that tie the pipeline together. 6 jobs, one enormous machine, all aimed at the same goal, searching an impossibly vast space to find medicines faster than ever. So when you see the next headline about a pharma company building a giant AI supercomputer, and there will be many, you'll know exactly what all that power is really computing. Thanks for watching.